Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. I think it's being recorded. Yes, we're being recorded. This will get posted probably on ETHCat Herders on YouTube later. We have an interesting agenda today. Welcome to the RPC Standards Call, number 5. We have a couple of cool things. We have a brief demo. Docusaurus has been added so we can view docs locally. We can discuss our process from a technical perspective, not a governance perspective, but from a technical perspective, how to get from specs through to the RPC compat Hive tests. Uh, so I think that's an interesting conversation that we can have. I'd also like to talk about filling tests. Right now, everything kind of revolves around Geth. That is not crazy, but it's a little less than ideal. So we can talk about how that works, whether or not there are any alternatives, and what we think about it. And then we have a number of PRs to actually take a look at and discuss. One for adding timestamps to log receipts, and another for coming up with a better way to manage our error codes and the messages that they emit when we want to cover those in tests. If we have time, maybe we'll have a little open floor and we can discuss some of the broader things that we need as far as developers might need. So, it's one thing to have a technical process in place that outlines everything, but since this is kind of a writing exercise when you're writing specs, what's our editorial process, right? Like what are the types of things that we prefer? What is the style guide, etc. So any questions here at the top before we jump into things?
Yeah, I think all good. Let's go.
Awesome. Welcome, Zane. I understand you're from the RPC, Open RPC project. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Awesome. 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 Okay. Good news. So let's do a brief demo. If I can share my screen. It's really pretty straightforward. Oh no, I'm not allowed to share my screen. Oh, is it because I'm not the host? Let's try it. Sorry, folks. Give me one second here. All right, let's make him rejoin before I can share. I'll be right back. It's going great. Okay, and now this time I should be able to share. There we go. Okay, got this, get this out of the way. So what folks may have recalled from working with, this is our execution APIs. Can everybody see my terminal screen? I'll make sure I have my whole desktop being shared.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, great. Thanks. All right, so this is our execution APIs channel, right? We've since installed Docusaurus. All right, you see that this is just going to be a new thing that you have to do. I don't know if it's been added to requirements yet, but that's the whole thing. But now if we run this, this is all special thanks to Acolyte, who did a little bit of the updating that we needed to get this running. Now it'll spin up a server and you can actually browse the docs locally. And so, it's Docusaurus, so I'm not familiar with it, but I understand that it's fairly common and it's basically just gives you a demo of the different API calls, example requests, expected responses, et cetera, et cetera. I think there might be some issues. Let's see. Yeah, I think there's some validation issues over here on the right with the params and stuff that are still being looked at. but it's a start. So that's fun. That's progress. Um, I encourage folks to take a look at this, make sure that it's useful, give us feedback when it's not. And of particular interest, I think, is kind of this landing page here, right? So the JSON RPCs themselves are all getting automatically, sorry, the entries for these are all getting automatically generated based on the specs. What we really want to focus on, though, to add value, I think, is a lot of this stuff, the narrative, the introduction, the contributor's guide, right? These are the things that are going to help people understand the writing style for the specs moving forward. Um, so take a look at these pages. These are kind of just initial first draft. Um, Open PRs into it. Come up with discussion points on this call. Like if you think that, this is a problem, let's talk about it on the call. Add an agenda item, right? Um, so questions, comments, concerns. Zane, what's up?
Yeah, this is awesome and everything. So, as one of the co-founders of OpenRPC, um, there is like a mild concern. So, essentially, the reason why docs were struggling to run locally is that there had been a bit of rust on the original like OpenRPC generator that actually generates the docs. So at the start of the year, myself and like Shane, like overhauled the infrastructure. And so I found an issue, so I don't want to take up too much space, but I just did want to say that like there are a couple issues with this. So
Okay.
with the DocuSource docs and the JSON RPC execution of the APIs, like it still uses like window.ethereum hard coded, so you can't point it to any sort of RPC endpoint. So if you were like say on some other network that like still has like git block for instance, which they all should because the spec, you wouldn't be able to necessarily test that unless you kind of went through this metamask oops. The other thing is that there's validation issues with the form, which I think you saw. And then sort of the final thing is actually because we no longer have access to the DocuSource plugin, we can't and couldn't update it to meet the new versions of the spec. And in the new
Mhm.
spec, we have a couple of major features that are like going forward the way that we'll end up upgrading the underlying like specifications called the extension spec. And so there's no way to really support that. So this is really cool to hear that you're interested in having more pages, which Gatsby can do. And I think Acolyte raised that question as well. I just didn't catch this PR before like it landed back. I think a day after I reached out to light clients about all of the changes that had happened. So it's kind
Okay.
of a weird confluence of things. But
No problem.
so now this, I get a good sense of like what Acolyte was saying that about the additional pages. Yeah. Okay, so
Okay, cool.
that's my long spiel.
No, that's awesome and super important too because I am not a JavaScript person. I am way out of my element on this call. Could you explain a little bit about what Gatsby is and how it kind of fits into this problem space alongside or as an alternative to Docusaurus?
Yeah, so Gatsby is a very similar CMO style management. Gatsby maybe predates DocuSource and in terms of like being one of the ones that you could then write Markdown and have these all be like Markdown or Markdown X pages, and then have it like render in Docs. Because I think that's like the biggest benefit is that you don't really necessarily have to go around like designing pages and HTML and JavaScript. You can just simply write the markdown and then you have a theme that gets applied and then it creates all the links and the sidebars and the title, just like this. So it's essentially the same thing as Docusaurus, just a different ecosystem. And the reason why we updated the package and the generator to maintain Gatsby is just because we were aware that execution APIs needed an update to be able to run like locally, and we didn't want to break anything. So like literally you can just bump the version and then you get like everything working locally. Um, the same as it was before. But it seems like there are some improvements that you want. So uh, that's what I would say is pretty much so Gatsby's thing is that someone can develop a theme, which we already have. Once the theme is generated, you can then customize that theme mostly through non-technical like configuration or single JavaScript or JSON. And then whenever you want to add pages to it, you just add Markdown and your pages directory, and then it will render the additional pages that you want. So, for instance, the introduction, what are execution APIs, get started, all that's just defined in Markdown. Yeah.
Hmm, cool. All right. Thank you. That's super helpful. It sounds like the recommendation is to switch to Gatsby. Um,
Yeah, I dare I say to roll back one to either roll back the change or update the change because the problem for running locally was is that the code had drifted and had pegged people back in an earlier version of Node.
yeah.
But then since we did all of the changes, we basically completely overhauled the entire ecosystem. Um, so you could use modern Node.
Okay. So
Yeah.
what if somebody took it upon themselves to do the Gatsby upgrade on a branch, and then next call we can do like a side by side and folks can kind of decide which way they want to go. Does that
Yep.
sound like a useful exercise to people on the call?
If that's what people want to do. I think Simpson Raj or Sims, he has a uh, branch and a PR that runs the Gatsby locally as well.
Sick.
But
Okay.
we'll get to that.
Yeah, yeah, I can demo it during my time. I can also show how it ties to the extension specs, but I'll leave it for that later.
Awesome. That's perfect. Okay, fantastic. All right. Thank you, Zane. That was super helpful. I think by next week we can probably make this decision and have something reliable and local for folks to view their spec changes. Okay, process. One thing I wanted to talk about from spec to RPC compat, right? So I think we all expect the RPC compat suite of Hive to be kind of our metric as to whatever standards we quote unquote come up with, they're adhered to and all the clients, um, you know, respect them. So the process for getting from spec to RPC compat is interesting. I started playing with this. I'm not great at it at the moment. And one of the things that I noticed is that you kind of write the spec, right? It goes into YAML. The spec is generated. You get example requests from your spec. Um, you fire them at an instance of Geth that has been preloaded with a specific blockchain. And then whatever responses come back go into the tests. And we call this process test filling, right? The tests then do an exact string match on the request and the response. Um, and so for instance, I think we'll probably get to this when we talk about the error codes and error handling right now. It's a little problematic. You know, our tests don't have a lot of latitude. They're very, very, very strict. And I don't know that that's a bug or a feature? So I think that's probably one of the first things I'd like to discuss more broadly is like, what do people think about a test suite that is more sophisticated than just doing kind of a strict string match on the JSON output? Does anybody have any experiences that they'd, like to share on the matter?
I guess, like you mentioned, this is where the error codes come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, string, it's exactly the same issue we've been facing internally, and I've noticed a lot of people complained from the community. The error string matching isn't great. Exactly why we started writing the spec for error codes. Again, I can discuss that later, but that's like you mentioned, string matching isn't great at all.
Thank you, Simpson.
Yeah, I think like I think that general game plan kind of makes like sense. Years ago when I used to work for Ethereum Classic, like we also generated a test suite like that, and a lot of the things are just like if you have the blockchain in a particular state, then it's great for testing things like Uncle Block. And then the range of responses that you get from that, because it's like the blockchain needs to be in a particular state in order for like the GAF response to return back specifically what you're looking for to make sure that okay, uh, it did get the uncle from the block. And like it got all of them, or it did the proper thing for figuring out the heaviest chain and all these other sort of questionable like things. Um, so I think some of the exact matching probably makes sense, but I think when you get to multi-client compatibility, you kind of need more uh, information about like Sims was saying earlier, it's like you need more information about how to like what is acceptable and the acceptable range for the response. Because a lot of clients, I think even back then, which was about 4 or 5 years ago, and like parity client was a lot bigger back in the day. um, it like parity would do different things than what GAF would do in terms of returning error codes. And so you kind of have to like know that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Counterpoint. Are there other areas of the RPC API outside of error messages that we value ambiguity? So my counter argument being, yes, exact string matching is too flexible. We don't actually need that flexibility in anywhere other than these error messages. Is that true, or am I just being a negative Nancy?
Um, okay, no one answered, so I'll take the opportunity. I did notice. I I do feel that we need that flexibility. We cannot probably give error codes for all use cases. What I mean by that is some chains behave very differently than rest of the other chains. For example, some chains have a run RPC client as just a client and doesn't do any execution, forward it to maybe some mirror nodes or completely different architecture. In that case, um, the same error code could mean the same error message could mean a completely different thing for them. I've noticed a couple of instances where I'm so confused if I should assign a error code for a certain error message or not, because the error message in a client, let's say Besu, is completely different from what we get from a different chain, which has their own client. So I do believe the string matching or the flexibility is needed, at least until it all evolves and gets standardized much more. But what we can do for now is probably focus on the bigger use cases where most people rely on, or the common error messages or code that is particularly useful for the community, rather than focusing on every intricate details of every single chain or every single client. We can, probably take them use cases where people do rely on, like, insufficient balance. These are really straightforward. These should remain same across different client compatibilities, but it could take some uncle blocks or difficulty where some chains have difficulties and some chains don't. Or yeah, a few more examples like that. I do believe for now some or a bit of flexibility is still required.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's JSON, right? Like, there's going to be tons of places where the order of properties is not specified, and you could break a test just by rendering them differently. Should that be flagged as an error in our testing suite? I don't think so, because the clients won't really care. They shouldn't care that the order of properties in most cases. Um,
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it makes a lot of sense to be able to have like some flexibility on that because, like you said, you can test only your expectations for data. So like if you had, like you said, some sort of thing that relies on the order of the JSON properties being in a particular thing, you'll never catch a reordered JSON property, which is still like a valid state of the data to be in. So it feels like there's like some argument to have like a way of generating the particular client states that you'd want to test. So it's like,
okay.
oh, this should generate this, and then we should get back this. And that's a very broad expectation that, okay, you should have these uncles.
Yeah. So that's kind of a good segue to the next question that I wanted to discuss is like, okay, how do we fill the tests? Right? So right now we fire them at Geth and then we get a very specific, Geth specific answer back. Um, and so is it up to the user that's writing the spec to mark up that response further? Meaning say, oh, this is actually a wildcard, for instance. Here's an error situation. Yes, I want to do maybe I want to do exact numeric match that the value is equal to or greater than or less than an error code. Or I want to wildcard out the message or make sure maybe the message contains a certain substring that has particular value from the input. Um, the process that we have in place today doesn't really have any mechanism for that, as far as I know. Um, well, how? You have your hand up?
Yeah, sorry. I was just wanted to go back. Actually, I mean, it's to the error code and its importance in the spec. In my opinion, I think we should, after listening, I was kind of, I think there is flexibility. Of course, the JSON one is obvious, but for error code, I think one advantage of being very specific is that even the test can fail, and then we, as a community, we have visibility on where the client differs.
Hmm.
And so in some way, by being specific, we open up the conversation to everyone saying, hey, look, we should fix that. And if instead we keep it flexible, we are kind of giving up on trying to fix it. I mean, that's one way of saying, maybe it's a bit exaggerating, but I think there is benefit in actually being, okay, this is the code for that. And also, there's another thing we could look into is to have specific code ranges for other chain for that don't follow the like the mainnet, for example, or and also it's also come back to there is another place where error code are very important is on the wallet integration, because there is also, there is kind of there is also, these RPC call, we call them RPC call, but they are actually, wallet call, like, EIP 1193. And so error code will also be useful here. And I guess a range for wallet will be also interesting.
Thank you. I'm just notating all that. That's great input. Okay. Yeah. All right. Good, good, good. So test filling. Is this a subject that anybody else has thought of? Is this something that we maybe want to put a pin in and have discussions next meeting after folks have had some time to think about it? I have thought about it, and I'm kind of the mind of, well, either you fill the tests from your reference implementation, which is Geth, and that is what we do today. And I don't know what the alternative would be, right? So I don't know what the or is. The or could maybe be the executable execution specs. They do not have an RPC component right now. Like you kind of just interact with them with transactions and blockchains themselves and, block imports. So I don't know that there really is any option other than filling them from Geth. So I guess what I would ask for is someday we fill things from, or I shouldn't say someday, in the short to medium term to improve this process. I think we should continue filling things from Geth, but also add the flexibility that we think that we need as part of a manual process for the spec writer. So that's just a thought. I don't want to be prescriptive here, but I see that this is the direction that we need to go in.
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, I guess let me just rephrase and summarize that a little bit more concisely. So today we specifically depend on Geth, and we depend on the specific output from Geth, meaning requests from the spec get executed against Geth, and the response becomes the test case. An exact match to that response is our test case. We have two options to proceed from there. One would be, okay, we'll use something other than Geth, and we don't have that. And the other is continue to do what we're doing, but allow for authors to more specifically curate the responses, right? Go in and edit them and have more flexibility that says, yes, this was the exact response that I got from Geth. Here's the assertions that I want to put around that response. And our process doesn't have any room for that right now.
Yeah, and I guess like maybe if we think about like working backwards as to like sort of like what's the overall goal of like that. So like part of it is like, okay, your data can be still on spec, and even if it's not an exact match, and certain things are required. So you may have like required fields and required like formats. So like, but the required fields and required formats just speak to um, just like being able to do something that's more specific, that's more flexible than an exact match, but maybe even if you're going to say like a JSON schema spec for the responses, which I think there already are, so you could then validate that schema against the response, and then as long as that's there. But then on the flip side, there's this qualitative like version of like, oh, it matches this the syntactic quality of the response, but the actual values may be wrong. So like you need these values to be there.
So yeah, that's a good, so I think that's probably a broader conversation with Ethereum in general and the testing team specifically. Like, what does the RPC compat test suite expect? And I think that might be a reasonable line to draw. Like maybe you don't check the values for, um, you know, maybe you're not validating on specific values. I don't know. Maybe there's other test suites where you do that.
Yeah, it's interesting because if I think about goals, like if I'm a client developer and I'm writing a new, like say L2 client, and I want to know that like, okay, my client does the right thing. Given a certain set of data, it's going to return back the right thing. Then I need to know that the values that I get back are like exactly correct. Um, and then there's other cases where like I want to return back a superset of data that is still valid according to the spec. So I guess maybe in my mind, it's like the thing that is the most important is to just figure out like, am I executing to spec and is my client behaving properly? I think that's what you're getting at. It's like proper behavior and proper syntax are two different things. So it's like if you call get uncle and there are definitely uncles in the block according to like the data that's set up in the test, but you're not returning back uncles, but you're not returning back all of the uncles, but you're returning back 2 out of 3 of them in the
Hmm.
correct format, then you would like pass. Um, because syntactically, there's nothing wrong with what you're
Hmm.
returning back. But I guess I want to say semantically, but that's not actually right. It's just the values are wrong. There's no fuzziness to it. You're just missing parts of the data. So you've kind of got the syntactic thing, which I think is the easiest thing to validate. And then you've got the value thing, which is like, I'm missing, my client is wrong. And I think like Compat should help you maybe test both controversially. I don't know.
That's the question. Yes, controversially, right? Like that's the thing that I'm wondering myself. It's like, is it a good practice to layer your tests like this? Because theoretically, you would actually have kind of two suites of tests running at the same time to use your example. Maybe there's an uncles suite of tests that validates that uncles are, all the different types of logic that we have around that. Every single test in there is going to rerun schema validation on it, right? If you layer them like that. So I think, what is the broader testing strategy with regard to layering these things? Maybe there isn't one. Maybe it's just more tests are always better. Um, Interesting. All right.
Yeah, I think just like discussing it and thinking about this problem for first time in a while, it's like I feel like uh it feels like my intuition says that the syntactic testing is like so easy and so light that you simply, if you return back the spec and you're just spec, then you're always validating on like you return back valid data. And then the other thing is like the other layer to that is you return back valid values or expected values. And I think
Hmm.
to your statement earlier is how well defined are the expected values? So like if uh, any of the other L2 clients that are out there, we'll even say like if Besu returned back something that's slightly different in the uncles or a superset of data, like does the spec, like is it well defined enough to be able to say like but like Geth is returning back the right thing. I guess
Right.
that's the real problem. The real problem is we don't know that Geth returns back the absolute right thing for everything. And so we just use Geth as a reference because we think that Geth is implemented accordingly to spec, but it's not like formally validated. In the past, it has been formally validated, where people have done formal validations of it. Um, so we kind of trust Geth as that canonical reference for this is the right thing. This is the way you should be handling uncles. But if there's a client bug in Geth, then everybody else has to kind of hit that. But, and through test, you would hope that Besu, who ran Compat and got back a different value for, let's say, the uncles than what Gaff returned, would then be like, hey, look, Gaff, we think you're maybe wrong. We tried to fix this. And you hope that like Gaff being the reference doesn't drive other clients to implement the same bugs. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The more that we talk it through, I think just do JSON schema, I think is kind of our answer in the medium term. Meaning that when we write the spec, we generate requests, and hopefully JSON schemas to validate the responses. And then, yeah. And then you just check your filler against the JSON schema, but not necessarily a strict string check that would that would cover the data as well. And I think that actually speeds up our testing development process as well, right? So like right now, if I find a problem in a spec, or if I disagree with a test, I have to actually update Geth. I have to like open a PR into Geth and kind of, interfere with like a lot of parts of the ecosystem that I really shouldn't have to. um, in order to refill the test. Now, if the test was just rerunning the validation against the JSON schema, then I could still move forward and then raise the data issue with the Geth team for them to solve it elsewhere with regard to, to use the uncle example again, right? There's probably an uncle suite somewhere else that now needs to be fixed, but I can at least pass RPC compat because I'm passing the schema. Simpson, your hand's up.
Yeah, just want to check the existing OpenRPC JSON schema. Does the value validation too? I see a lot of validations present in regex form for pretty much most of the fields.
Okay.
So we're talking about the behavioral tests of each field or responses, or just about the data?
I think we would like it to not cover the data for now.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, which is already present in Open RPC spec we have, which means we should remove it from there.
No, because like,
Um,
I think we're conflating a couple different things. So I think like the specification that's in the OpenRPC document is just saying that the values match a particular pattern.
Right.
The test and compat in the other set say the values should be 0xF3788900.
Okay.
Eight.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And
Okay.
if you're
Okay.
not that, then you've done something wrong.
It makes sense now.
And it's
Sorry about that.
not, no. It's good that we get everything clear because then we're setting a good level
Right.
of
Right.
understanding amongst us to talk about it.
Yeah. No, yeah, this is a valid point because I I understand now because I faced the same issue when I wanted to extend the test for RPC the error code mapping. Yeah, that's a good point to talk about. The way I was thinking of solving it is by doing first test and expecting the value that the first test would expect rather than preloading the state. But yeah, I think it's much more complicated than that.
And like, I don't think that we can really get rid of data validation because, well, uh, because I think the client developers like need some sort of way of knowing that their data is wrong or potentially wrong.
Yeah.
um, yeah, but I don't know how like the state loading, I guess like I don't know the process. And you were saying that, Justin, you were saying that the state loading happens from uh like inside the GAF client, that you have to basically construct whatever block data and to the Go package. Is that the
Yeah.
process?
Yeah. So when you run the fillers, basically, you provide a block import, and when you bootstrap the filler, you import everything off of the disk, and now you have executed all those blocks, and you have a particular state in mind. And when the developers write their assertions, they will have done that as well.
Interesting. Yeah. Maybe there's a, oh, I would say maybe there's a way to like tease all of that outside of GAF itself. And like then it's just like, oh, okay, I have a filler for this thing. But at the same time, you kind of need the coupling between the version of GAF and the responses that come
Yeah.
back.
Yep.
So like you kind of have to.
Yeah, this is why I've been kind of ambivalent about, is this a bug or a feature, right? Like, I think it's kind of a feature because you have to, like you said, you have to. You need a reference implementation.
Yeah. There's just no other way around it. I think probably for some of the other things, it's just more of an application of the spec schema to the outputs um, for schema validation, but you also are going to need the data validation. So it
Yeah.
shouldn't just be strict match. It should be like pass a schema validation, and then you probably have to write some additional logic to validate the inputs of the data, like because
Yeah.
they're going to be just in different orders and things like that. Probably the cheapest thing to do is to just key value pairs sort keys. That comes to mind. So that way, like, yeah, you can't, alphabetical order is alphabetical order. And like,
Right.
okay, you have to read it. It's JSON. It's not that big. It's not like millions of lines. It's like at most 1,000 key entry pairs. So I think that's like pretty, I think that would probably bring the flexibility to where clients respond all kinds of different ways. You get the JSON schema validation and you get the value validation. And then probably my second or third recommendation would be like to think about generative test in the sense of like testing scenarios. So the process that you do to create the, like, say the uncles, um, open that up so other people can create uncles, get back results from GEF, and then like kind of have a way of loading in their own fillers to be able to like have it be not specifically tied to. So you do the thing that works specifically, and then and a more stringent test would be to do the fuzzier thing, which is like, here's a thing that generated some
Yeah.
uncles. This is the expected result, that there'll be two uncles, and then you should get two uncles back. What those uncles are, I don't know.
Okay.
It's like the process to generate the test data, but you can do it on your own, kind of a thing.
Okay. All right. I want to put a pin in this. We got 10 minutes left and we still have a couple PRs I want to give folks time for. But this is a rich vein of discussion, so feel free to continue it on the Discord, anywhere you like, asynchronously, and I'll make sure that we continue talking about it on the next meeting agenda. Uh, Next up, Wihua. Am I pronouncing that correctly? You had a PR for adding timestamps to the receipt schema.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the nickname is Wigawag.
Wigglewag, got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, 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 that's yeah, exactly that. Yeah, it's a PR like to add the log, the time to logs and other related RPC methods as well. I think I cover them all because of the way the schema is structured. So I think the PR cover all the case. But yeah, the main interest was driven from the need for the logs in particular.
Okay. I don't see any problems with this off the top of my head, but I'm not a maintainer. So I will ping the maintainers to remind them that this is out there and that they should provide any input on the PR itself.
Perfect.
Cool. And then yeah, I think Simpson has a big PR to discuss with the JSON RPC error codes.
Yes, thank you. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yeah, please do.
Thank you. Right. I'll just share the whole screen.
All
I'll
right,
share. I have to quit and come back. Oh, you can see it. Okay,
I can
cool.
see you.
Oh, great. All right.
can see.
Cool. Let me start with the initial proposal I wrote a long ago. I wanted to write this as an EAP and then got to know that this has to go into execution API repo. So we kind of modified, but the gist is all the same. Currently, we don't have a standardized error code, as everyone knows, and every client, every chain handles this in their own way, which results to catastrophic reusing of same error codes for multiple different errors or multiple different scenarios. So you cannot use any of the existing error codes. The field just occupies, and it's of no use. No one can be using it if they're working with multiple clients or chains, in short. And I've done study. Again, the study was like done long back across multiple different clients and stuff. You could see the same error code across multiple different scenarios and different values across different clients, overlapping and reusing the same error code, such as 32,000 or 32,602. Same thing happened all over. There was no way I could find out an overarching unique set of error codes. Hence this whole proposal. Uh, that was the first thing, and I started looking into is there an actual way I can rely on these error codes, because the error matching of string, like you mentioned, is really error prone, because every time the client goes through an upgrade, they change a space or they change a dot, and it entirely breaks our systems, and we cannot rely on them. We have to go and find out what was breaking, and then modify the regex to actually match to the new error message. Error messages are a string or paragraphs, and it actually doesn't make sense to rely on them to have an stable environment for anyone to rely on. So the proposal is we have a provision to use the error codes that we are not using already. Why not just use that? So that is all what we are talking about. And I've noticed so many people in so many different communities have actually recommended the same thing. It's just no one has started it yet, even though this was very apparent. So I'm not doing any magic here, just implementing what people are actually recommending it, just going ahead and do the work. The way we are proposing may be different. We can come to an agreement once we discuss this, or once we get a feedback. Maybe this is not the way we want to implement actually, and send it out. But this is what I thought was best based on common scenarios that everyone would interact on a day-to-day basis, and then we can. Of course, cover no overarching or other than what's mentioned here, what people would do that I'm not aware of. The way I initially did is we have these two. If you open up the JSON RPC spec here, they've given provision for others to use. They've reserved these error codes. The rest of the error codes are open for you to use. So these are the existing standards. And we can see the existing standard already defined. And this is also existing for implementation specific. So we leave these two ranges and use rest, any of the rest. Here we've decided to stick to this range, which gives you like 20,000 error codes to be occupied for EVM purposes. We wanna, if we can extend, we can extend, shorten it, and the next thing we are trying to do is grouping. Grouping makes it really easy for users to understand. Unlike, so there is a problem with HTTP error codes. It's obvious to know 400 range tells you something and 500 range tells you something. Certain error codes are, you can resend the request. For certain error codes, you cannot resend the request. It's not easy to do that with blockchain clients, because one error could mean one thing for a specific client, but it doesn't mean the same thing. You cannot resend the same error request as it is to a different client. So the better way to organize this is just by grouping well-known concepts across different execution client, which will be the classification I mentioned is just from the top of my mind, from looking at different things, which can be, is not set in stone. Gas error is, which everyone relies on, like insufficient fees, gas not enough, out of gas, ran out of gas, all that. Same way like transaction pool, the transaction already in mempool, already known transaction, things like these. So essentially that's all. We allocate 200 error codes to a group and leave the rest for rest of the future implementation or future where clients can claim these ranges or like implement specific error code into any of these categories and just add it to the spec. So if you add it to the spec, you do 810 for your error code, you have flexibility to add in the future. We can extend these ranges more, but just for now to come up with a point or like to paint the picture, we kept it to 200 for now. And I've gone through multiple clients, multiple examples of what errors they return and what could be the best error code for that. So all the examples are linked here, or like the code, or the link to the code where it was actually there when they did the investigation. But yeah, and so this is grouping, and how we want to do the structure of the error message or response is three fields: code message, which is already done by most of the clients. We want to add one more field. This is backwards compatible, so it's not mandatory for you to add or anyone to add. This is only to provide more context to the user, where if you want to return a whole error stack for a user to understand more. So what would that allow us is you can standardize the message also for the well-known error codes. For example, if I scroll back, let's say insufficient funds, every different client returns this in a multiple different way, in all different combination. This allows us to actually also standardize the message, the standard message. This doesn't have to be this way. We can do like short codes, error message codes, not a numerical, but an alpha value, and can standardize that too. It's not implemented now, just it opens up a lot of possibilities for us. For now, we'll focus on the error codes, but we can also do the error messages. So it allows you to add more extra data into the data field. That can be even a struct or an interface. You can pass in whole different information through data field rather than just restricting yourself to string. So that's the gist of the proposal. I will move on to how we plan to implement it. Initially, the RPC Open RPC specification did not support multiple error codes or an array of error codes or grouping of error codes. So that's where Zane came in, sorry. We worked with Zane, and then luckily we were on time. So Zane had the idea of extension specs. You guys should check it out. It's amazing. The extension specs, what it does is it allows us to define a custom specification implementation for any purposes. So happy to say that error codes was the first official extension spec that OpenRPC wrote and adopted, which we can directly refer from OpenRPC's repos and standards. Now, what that allows us is actually group errors and specify more than one error, which was not possible before. Before, when you had an example, I can take up an example where you can see you'll have one error message or one error code returned for a sample method, Ethereum method. Now we can add multiple. This again allows us actually not to redeclare everything and complicate the spec. So the spec is still readable, and you can do references, you can do inline, you can use the same error group across multiple different methods. So which is what we have done here. So you see submit.yaml, which is a ETH_submit transaction, has these error codes, and the same is reflected in I don't know, this other one. But sure, yeah, please go ahead.
Well, we're just at time, Simpson. So
Oh,
unfortunately,
okay. Okay, got it.
we've run a
Maybe
little.
I'll take a 1 minute and then summarize what's happening here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind actually picking this up because this extension is very interesting, and I think I guess it's just you and me on the call, and Zane, he's probably
Oh,
familiar with
okay.
it.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Just noticed that. All right. Anyway, we
But let's
have
pick this up. Let's put this on the agenda also for next meeting as well. But continue, please.
sounds good. Sounds good. Perfect. Yeah, I can explain again next meeting. To summarize, we can now define multiple error codes, and we can see that in OpenRPC spec.json. We can see multiple error codes reflected for a particular method without having to redeclare everything. That's one. And we can even implement the in spec check. We also implemented the validation of these error codes. So a get invalid number or get storage invalid key, if the error code doesn't match with what we have defined in the spec. Currently, for the flexibility, we are returning warned. We can extend the validation to include the error message in the future if you want to, but currently it's not done again. So it is possible to validate all the returned error codes for now. So I'll stop right there.
Okay. No, that's interesting. It actually gives us more options for solving our problem where maybe we do want a standardized message, but we leave the data field completely unchecked. That's
Exactly.
another option that's interesting. Okay. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for hanging around after we went over. Apologize for that. And I have a bunch of notes. I'll post the agenda for 2 weeks from now in the next few days, and see you on the Discord.
Well, awesome. Thanks so
Thank you very
much.
much.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Simpson. See ya.